What are the major tensions at the intersection of the Muslim minority and wider American society? And we're going to hear from Dalia, Mogahed, Akbar, Ahmed, Zahid Bukhari, and Ari Gordon. Dalia, do you want to start?
Sally, first of all, I think something to state up front is that Muslim Americans are not in agreement. It's a very diverse community. We see a lot of different topics and important issues that Muslim Americans care about. So to start by saying that they are one group is already a slight misperception of the Muslim American community. Now, what are the major tensions? I think we should start by actually looking at some of the data. There's actually a lot of major points of commonality that actually outweigh the tensions. Muslim Americans, like all Americans, are concerned about our national security, and then they have concerns that many people of faith care about, like poverty, like issues of social justice. Now, the issues that Muslim Americans have been really grappling with since 9/11 have been issues of civil liberties. And I don't think that there is a tension between that, on that issue between the greater American community, but there is a gap in awareness, as John has explained. Muslim Americans are keenly aware, at least many of them, of civil liberties issues, because it has been the Muslim community that has been the primary target of civil liberty issues after 9/11. And this hasn't made the news, and so the wider American community is not aware of what's going on. And so there is, in my view, not a tension, but simply a gap in awareness.
Okay, Akbar.
Thank you. What are the major tensions? I could speak as a scholar, as a Muslim. I travel extensively. I write about the community here in the United States. I believe that we need to really understand the Muslim community much, much better. And therefore, I'm grateful for your subtitle, Deepening the Dialogue. I commend you for it. There is energetic dialogue around the subject, but we need to penetrate beneath the surface. We really know very little about the community. It remains a sort of mysterious ocean, as it were. And considering how important the American Muslim is as a showcase for the United States, greatly neglected. Certainly in terms of my discipline, that's anthropology, there are far too few global studies, that is of the whole community, based in actual fieldwork. Fieldwork meaning people going out there, living with the communities, spending some time with them. It's unknown territory. I'm personally taking a year off, my sabbatical, to conduct precisely such a study with my team who traveled with me in the Muslim world, journey into Islam. We're going to do a journey into America. They're here, in fact, both of them. It's reversing the process. And the questions we want to ask, some of the questions that John raised, some of the questions sitting with people privately in their homes, in the Midwest, on the East Coast, West Coast, who are your role models? What books do you read? Who inspires you? The generational gap. What is important in terms of definition? How do you define your identity? Are you Egyptian or Pakistani or American first? How does the media affect you? How does this constant, unending tidal wave of Islamophobia, how is this affecting you? And we also want to talk to non-Muslims in that community. How do they see Muslims? Have they ever talked to Muslims? Have they been to a mosque? Have they been to a Muslim home? And in these rural areas, sometimes you really feel that there is no communication, that people are informed through the media. And then, as Congressman Keith Ellison had pointed out, beneath the examination of the Muslim community and the challenges it faces, in fact, are we really looking at the challenge America faces to pluralism? Is there something much deeper going on? So we need to penetrate that also. I may point out that the Berkley Center has been very supportive of this project. They're on board. And we certainly would welcome any feedback, any interest in this project, I'm on the website. My email is akbar@american.edu if there are any questions about this project. But we do want to spend time in the field and come back and then have a series of meetings and seminars around it and share information that we get from the field. And for me as an anthropologist, I'm aware I'll be both the observer and the observed. It is a very exciting time, and as Jane says rightly, it's a time when America really wants to understand Islam beyond the stereotype, beyond the soundbite, and therefore deepening the dialogue, deepening the understanding. And that's precisely what I aim to do.
Zahid.
Let me begin with that I don't see any tension between Muslim minority and the American general society. Yes, there is a tension between Muslim minority and a minority of the American society, particular some influential groups in the American society. Yes, there is a tension. Look at the Muslim minority. Muslims are here from 80 different countries. A small Muslim globe is living in America. That is American exceptionalism. No other country of the globe has this type of diversity of the Muslim population. They are educated. But still, although yes, historically they were here even before Columbus, but the present community is very new kid on the block. 4 or 5 decades old, indigenous and immigrants. But after, in sociological terms, probably it would have taken 2 more decades for the Muslim minority to take part in the political and all other processes. But September 11 pushed the Muslim community to some extent prematurely get involved in the American politics, and Muslims are doing fine. But on the other hand, when they are looking at the minority of the American greater society, they are putting all blames on Islam, all blames on mosque, all blames on American Muslims about jihad and khilafah and sharia and madrasa, every Islamic term in negative connotation. And icing on the cake is Islamic fascism. That is the minority. And very small example, for example, it's very interesting that influential group of some of the evangelical Christians, some of the think tanks, some of the other experts, so-called, they are putting all those fears. The conservative radio talk show host and some other, they are putting all those fears about Islam and Muslim. That is the tension over there. And look at it's very interesting. All over the globe, Muslim population is increasing. And as you mentioned probably, that even Vatican doing at least one successful effort of reducing Muslim population with 1%. Again, they announced that the Muslims are increasing and their numbers are increased from comparing with Catholics. Every country Muslim numbers are increasing. Only in the United States, Muslim numbers are decreasing according to certain groups. On February 21st, 1989, according to New York Times, and that is Sahih Hadith here in America, Muslims were 6 million.
The Washington Post is Hadith here in America.
Hassan, Hadith. So both of them, Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. February 1st, 1989, according to New York Times, Muslims were 6 million. Every country Muslim number are increasing, and now we were told now we are maybe 2.83 million. Whatever variable we take, numbers are increasing with immigration, with conversion, with birth rate, number of mosques, everything. But again, the effort sometime is that why not show the numbers are decreasing? Just ignore the community. That's as the Muslims are not living here. The whole the presidential debate, other thing. I didn't see any moderator raising a question in any presidential debate about Muslim issue. What you will do with there are a question about other ethno-religious community, but not about Muslims, American Muslims. And so that is the tension that Muslims are saying that they are, although yes, they would have taken 2 more decades, but September 11 made them to adjust themselves, to change their mindset. And they are getting involved in grassroots level, in social service, in all local places. But again, they are saying that a minority of the American society, they just like to either ignore or decrease their impact or effect on numbers. So that is the tension there.
Okay, Ari?
I certainly appreciate a lot of the remarks that were said, covered some of what I was going to say. Certainly the opening that when we talk about the Muslim minority or the American Muslim community, it's really a misnomer, because as if to assume that there isn't cultural and ethnic and religious and political diversity and robust discussion going on, sort of simplifies a little bit. And I would say the same thing about the other term, wider American society. And what we're really talking about is a nuanced and complex mesh of interactions. And so certainly in the 2 minutes that I'm going to speak, I can't give it the appropriate nuance, but I hope that in our discussion we'll be able to parse out some of this. The way I see it, we're talking about two different groups. And we're talking about two different kinds of tensions. And the first group is individuals that either haven't met or may never meet, which is this sort of people in their homes, people who are getting their information from media, from whatever they've read, but not necessarily working for and representing institutions. And for these groups, these are problems of perceptions and misperceptions. And I think these issues are a little bit easier to solve when we talk about perceptions that Islam is somehow inherently connected to terror and terrorism, that there's some kind of inherent contradiction in being fully Muslim and fully American, that these perceptions exist in all non-Muslim Americans, that this is true of all Muslim Americans. These perceptions and misperceptions are out there, but I think that it's a happier story and they're easier to break. And some of the responsibility of, I would say, all of us around this table and our counterparts is to take every opportunity that we have to counter those perceptions. And so I could certainly cite from my own organization, American Jewish Committee, taking the opportunity of Representative Ellison being attacked for wanting to be sworn in on the sacred text of his faith, and certainly being attacked from elements of wider American society, but even from within the Jewish community, and saying this is not okay, and this is not what all Jews believe, and this is not what all non-Muslim Americans believe. Certainly worked very closely with the American-Islamic Congress and jointly testifying in the House, and worked with Georgetown on a number of programs. And publicizing this and taking these opportunities for statements is one thing to do. Local dialogues are another way to sort of have people meet one another and build those bridges to break the perceptions. But I think there's another piece for this group as well, and Professor Bukhari referred to it, which is that we're talking about a largely immigrant or children of immigrant community that was brought into the public eye somewhat prematurely, or more prematurely than my community was as immigrants and than many others. And 9/11 and certain factors on the international scene did that. And so we still have to give it a little bit of time for the dialogue of everyday life to kick in. Muslims in America are among the most educated and the most successful, and so as they see doctors and as they become doctors and they're seeing patients and lawyers and business people and shopkeepers and in the everyday interactions, I think that will kick in to break some of those perceptions as well. The second group I want to talk about, I think, is a little bit of a tougher issue because I don't think it will take care of itself, and I think the issues are a bit more substantive. And this is the interaction between groups, institutions that do work together, or those that could be working together and aren't. And here I would say, I want to also emphasize that by no means are we talking about Islam as a religion or all Muslims. I think the story is generally a happy one. And I think the cooperation is something that as an American and as a Jew, I'm very proud of. But there are some groups that raise questions for non-Muslim American groups as to how sufficiently they have distanced themselves from terror and terrorist organizations. Their approaches to certain foreign issues in Middle East peacemaking, certainly for Jewish groups, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is central, and what the approach is there in building peace and resolving the conflict. And one which has to do with consistency with the way that certain groups will take up some human rights issues and ignore others, and then the question of how to take that on the domestic front when we want to understand civil liberties and work together on civil liberties that I would say the majority of Americans are committed to, when it seems inconsistent with some activities. So I think those are some of the issues which are on the table. It's a sort of an unpleasant way to end, so I'm going to take the liberty, religious liberty, I suppose, of ending with the joke that I tell when I speak to Jewish audiences about Muslim-Jewish relations. We're in Washington. I'll talk about the metro. An Orthodox Jewish man gets onto the metro after his day at work and sits down. He's wearing a kippah. He opens up his Talmud and he starts to study. When down sits next to him a Muslim man and opens up a Quran and starts to read. Each one sort of looks over and notices the text of the other, is very impressed with the commitment of the other, is impressed with the ability to read the sources in the original language, and kind of want to start conversation but are a little bit nervous. So the Jewish guy opens up his mouth first. He says, "So, have you ever been to Israel?" To which the Muslim responds, "I think you mean Palestine." And they, get off to a terrible start, and they start talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and they talk about the Israel lobby and Islamic extremism, and every issue under the sun. Why is it that we'll eat your food, but you won't eat our food? Every issue, and they can't find one issue to agree upon until they do come to one, and that issue is abortion. And both agree that a fetus is not considered a viable life form, at least until it's graduated medical school. And so I think there are issues of tension, and there is a lot to discuss, but the commonalities are much stronger. And this story, as I said, is mostly a happy one. And looking forward to the discussion.
Sherif, did you want to say something?
Yeah, actually, thanks to Ari for bringing this up, because I was getting a little bit concerned. I always get concerned when people talk about common things, happy stories. We will have a lot of things to bridge, and that minorities, once the suggestion that the differences really are minorities on both sides, I get really concerned, because it does take one person, one voice to instill fear in the minds of thousands and millions of people. It takes probably 1,000 people of good voice to instill comfort and trust in the minds of 1 million people. So thanks, Ari, for trying to push a little bit the discussion into the most difficult part. And I'd just like to tell you what happened to me when I tried to read a certain book about Iran on the way to the plane. I picked it up in Geneva, which arrived at my desk, and I didn't feel conscious at all of bringing it and putting it in my bag to read on the plane. But all of a sudden, I was sitting next to a New Yorker next to me on the plane from Zurich, and I pulled this book up to read. And all of a sudden, everybody was staring at the book. After a while, I was reading it, Now, the reason I
You snuck it inside your Playboy magazine.
It's a very interesting publication about Khamenei, and I think it's important to bring what this, the little I read from that, because there is here a story of a leader, of a very important spiritual leader in Iran, who is actually have a lot of reasons for concerns, and also some reasons for potentially, depending on how you look at it. And I referred to also my visit to Iran last year, when I spent about a few days there, and it struck me how alive the story of the hostage situation, the U.S. Embassy hostage, was in 1979, 30-something.
Even now?
Yes.
Really?
It is there was a book given to me by one of the students who were in the part of the group that seized the embassy staff there, and she was actually a graduate of MIT, spoke English. She was acting as a translator to the students, and now she is she was a vice president of Iran at one point with Khatami, and she is still living with that narrative. But her book is called "Takeover in Tehran." And it's a play on words, because takeover, obviously, with the story of the embassy, but it's also a story, I think Professor Ahmed was referring to it in a certain way, that there are certain, and also Congressman Ellison was referring to it, that there are certain concerns that the Iranian people took in doing what they're doing, the students being one of them, is that this is probably their only insurance policy. That's their point of view. Now, I'm not endorsing or anything. I'm just relaying to you what was said there. And it was their insurance policy against the protection of their revolution and their right to determine the future of these people by themselves. Iranian people are deeply secular people, and so religion is not a main part of their daily life. However, they live with this because it seems to me that to be the offer that they will give in there. Now, from the U.S. side, we talk about U.S. politics, and it seems to me that when it comes to drawing the line, what makes a big difference, to answer question number 2, in the minds of Americans, American Muslims and non-Muslims, perhaps the position with regards to Iran and Saudi Arabia, which I'll come to in a minute, is really quite decisive. I find it extremely decisive on how people are perceived vis-a-vis their position on Iran. For many reasons, and good reasons, definitely. And I would really like to spend some time also having honest discussion of that, because this would probably explain a lot on where Muslim community feels the line is starting to appear when the debate is about that. There is definitely, like I said, there is definitely reason for concerns regarding the extreme views and the very hostile posture that the Iranian leadership takes against the U.S. and at the Jewish and Israeli community in particular. And I think it's extremely important that we take a very courageous look at that. A second thing which I draw by, in a certain way, to the Saudi population. Saudis are, for good or for bad, or right or for wrong, they are perceived as a very wealthy group of people who are irresponsible, who are actually been brought in, invoked by the September 11. The number of Saudi young people who are there is definitely sits here in the minds of many Americans I speak to about what happened there. And it seems that it's still not healed, this situation. What America does in its foreign policy in the Middle East will look completely different. Will be the people of the United States, the way I see it, will demand a different foreign policy if the perception of what Saudi Arabian society and Muslims is shaped or looks like. So, we need to also understand that there are in Saudi Arabia quite hostile views, especially on the Jews as well. And it is in the books, it is in the education, it's in the curriculum, it's there. It's a small group, it's a minority, but it is extremely alarming. It penetrates everywhere very quickly. Now, I don't have the answer. I'm just putting the issues on the table here, and I'd like to thank Ari for putting this forward, because that encouraged me to be a little bit more open about it as well.
Did you want to say something, respond to what he was saying? Yeah, okay.
In terms of the tension that is here in the United States and the survey that's been done lately about the image of Muslims in America and how is that image has been really is not doing much better than what it used to be before, and I think that goes back to many reasons. One of these reasons just been mentioned is that the Saudi influence in America and the spreading of the Wahhabi ideology in terms of funding many mosques, as well as now we see some universities as well who are getting that fund from the Saudi and speak on behalf of the same ideology and the same issues that the Saudi government or wherever the Saudi money is being poured in the United States, and certainly that creates a lot of tension, especially when you look at some of the Saudi curriculum that has been published here or has been used in some of the schools in the United States that's condemning the non-Muslims, whether the Christian, Jews, or even the Muslims who do not believe in the same ideology, giving a severe clear and a very radical and extreme picture of what people, especially if you're an outsider and you don't know much about Islam, and you come and you read this kind of materials, you think that all Muslims are thinking that way. And unfortunately, this has been the thing that's been spread around in many mosques, in many schools, that they are teaching this type of religious literature. Also, at the same time, if we are to go back to the American Muslim community, it's making us believe that we are part of the American society, as the American society is very diverse. But at the same time, this link to the Saudi Wahhabi money make us look like a hypocrites, because at the same time as this country does not believe in freedom of religion and does not believe in women's rights and many other issues, and we are here getting the money and spreading the literature, and all of these been used widely in the U.S., as well as using our freedom and freedom of press, freedom of religion, and tolerance here in the United States to spread this kind of materials. So the tension certainly will spread as well as will increase if we are not stop this kind of action, such as the funding from Saudi Arabia, as well as spreading this kind of literature.
I think Nihad, you had wanted to say something.
I have a few comments to make. First, as a person who's been working for the past 14 years on civil rights issues of Muslims, we are the primary organization in the country that deals with the points of tension between Muslims and the larger society. Let me just share this with you. Civil rights has been probably the fundamental and central issues of concern for American Muslims in the society. There's 25% increase in civil rights complaints last year, which is significant from any civil rights organization's reports, and that shows the sheer magnitude of the civil rights abuses that American Muslims believe. Now, also you have to keep in perspective that our work, for example, as CAIR before 9/11, used to be with the private sector, fighting discrimination at the private sector, and winning many cases with JCPenney, quality in hotels. Religious accommodation in the workplace was the major area of our work for us. But after 9/11, most of the civil rights cases that we receive are due to the government's policies. USA Patriot Act, the watch list, which I believe, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, that almost every Muslim activist in the United States, when they travel abroad and they come back, they get detained in airport. And I hardly see or recognize any Muslim leader who does not get stopped in the airport. So you strip people of their pride as being an American. In fact, a police officer approached me here in Virginia, Muslim police officer who's been serving in the force for the past 20 years. He's been harassed by his supervisors, by his co-workers, and the work environment has been made difficult for him to perform his duty because they're suspecting him, and he's been serving there for 20 years. And the question he asked me is, that I put before all of you, when do I become an American in America? What does it take for us to show that we are fully Americans so that people do not suspect us? So it is not a matter of the civil rights abuses. It is really historic accumulation of mistrust against Muslims and the manipulation of media images and headlines that affect people's daily lives. And that's why when I said in my earlier remarks, I'm disheartened to see the shallow level of understanding discourse in American society, especially among leaders of our society, whether religious leadership, political leadership, they shrunk the entire history into just simple sound bites, just to dehumanize others, just for political gains, to get votes and support from voters. My final maybe point is, the danger also is that there is a major shift in the relationship between American Muslims, the larger society, between America and the Muslim world, and that is a dangerous, very dangerous shift. Ignoring the elephant in the room, which is the issue of justice, whether here in the States or our foreign policies that have failed to bring justice, democracy, and freedom to people around the world. Shifting and ignoring the injustices that our policies have led to people. The war in Iraq, we cannot imagine invading a country without just seeing reaction, and even based on lies and misinformation that we all know. The majority of American Muslims are against the war, while at the beginning of the invasion, they were for it because of the information, the strength and the power of reality. The danger is in the shift, is when we shift the problem between injustices into ideological war. And that, I believe, is very dangerous to America and to the world, to ignore the justice and talk about the war of ideas, and not addressing the injustices that we have been inflicting on people and lacking the will to confront reality. Finally, if I may say, the relationship between American Jews and Muslim Americans is very critical to America and to the world. And I agree with Irie that there is tension. There's tension that we're not willing to talk about it. But also, that tension is really centered around foreign policy issue, not our internal relationship. Unfortunately, the relationship between Jews and Muslims in the United States is shaped based on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the challenge for all of us, Irie, from the American Jewish Committee, CAIR, and other major organizations, we really have to dig deep down in our hearts and face the question: when we condemn terrorism, do we consider terrorism only when Israeli civilians are killed, but not Palestinian civilians are killed? To me, terrorism is when civilians are killed, regardless of the perpetrator. When we have the courage to condemn the perpetrators and their actions, I think then we recognize the depth of the humanity of individuals, irrespective of their religious or ethnic background. So I'm with you. When a terrorist attack takes place against civilian Israelis, we have condemned them. We have a track record of this as CAIR. But I'm yet to see major Jewish organizations condemning a single act when Palestinian civilians are killed, just for the sake of principle. So it is not a political question on the definition of terrorism. It is an ethical responsibility to define who is a terrorist and who is not. And that, if we want to distance ourselves from this issue, then Muslims and Jews can really live in peace and harmony. And I conclude with this, sorry to take longer than I should have. I believe that if American Muslims and American Jews put their heads together in a peaceful, frank, and open manner, they can help Muslims here and Jews here and abroad coexist, and we can produce a very good example, because we live and we respect diversity, pluralism, and freedom. Thank you.